everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Listen to the Music. I am one of your hosts, Genevieve Dodson.
And I'm the other, Alfred Carl Dotson.
And I'm going to let him take it away with the album that was chosen for this episode and to give us some context on it.
Well, darling daughter, the album that I have chosen for this episode is the Andy Summers and Robert Fripp I Advance Masked, the reissue of 2025, the David Singleton mixes. It's been a while since this CD had a proper remix, and even a surround sound remix at that. So I picked this up just about a few months back. It's kind of been a steady play in my car, and when you contacted me about this podcast, I said, that would be a perfect one to do since it's brand new to me, and a new reissue is always a fun thing to talk about because there's always some hidden gems that show up on those.
So you were aware of this, though, like before the reissue?
Oh, yes. I was aware of the CD. I had checked it out from the library 20 years ago, one of the original, just a remaster, like an 89 remaster from that series. And but then it just kind of went out of print, and that was it. But in order to get any copies of it, I was checking it out from the local library and made a copy.
That checks out, yeah. And I thought it was unmasked. Is that like the original and then the reprint was named something else? Because that's what it was called on Apple, when you look it up on Apple.
On the unmasked, that is the disc, like a disc 3 sort of thing. It's just extra stuff that was left over from the recordings.
Okay.
And that actual CD, I believe, is called Mother Hold the Candle Steady. There's a third CD that was added into the project,
okay. Yeah.
But the actual whole recording that I picked up a few months back is Andy Summers and Robert Fripp, the complete recordings, because they did 2 full albums together that were released to the general public.
Okay, interesting. So I wrote down for my impression of this album is that it's definitely not something I would have listened to on my own. I feel like that's definitely part of why you picked it. But it was also very interesting for me to listen to it because if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know my family super well, my dad does a project called Thrack. It is a King Crimson tribute band here in St. Louis. And so I'm very familiar with King Crimson and stuff, but 9 times out of 10, if it's being played, I'm hearing you play it. So it was very interesting to actually listen to the original artists and stuff. I said picking a fully instrumental album as your first album pick was a very interesting choice. And I'm curious as to why an instrumental album was the first choice for you instead of picking something that maybe would have been more mainstream popular for your age group.
Again, while I was when you introduced this idea of doing this with me, and I was thinking of the all the albums that I listened to and this one happened to be the one that I had just recently picked up and was just heavily listening to.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that would be just the perfect thing to go with. And it's kind of a new release, but kind of not. It's been out of print for a while. And like I said, it's got a lot of new stuff going on in it.
Yeah. I said something on my impression of this album that I don't know if most people would say, but I said because you've played these artists around me so much, especially as a kid when I was living at home and stuff, it was very calming and very soothing for me. I don't know if most people would say that, and I did a very passive listen for my first listen of it, and then for the second listen I really actually focused my full energy on it. And I noticed, and maybe it was also because I was very tired, I was on a trip in Texas at the time that I was listening to it the first time, but I fell asleep. I fell asleep when I listened to it the first time, and not because it's boring or anything, because it definitely isn't. There's a lot to pay attention to, but just because for me it has a very soothing quality to it because of you.
And the instrumental aspect of it does kind of aid in that, it kind of putting you to sleep. As you say, it's not boring, but it eases you.
Yeah.
And it does the same for me. And even when I was listening to it, right after I'd picked up the new one, I'm listening to the surround sound masters on the system that I have in my living room here. I was, sitting on the couch there, and I found myself occasionally dozing off just from the soothingness, as you say, of the material. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot, and there is a lot going on. Robert Fripp plays like Robert Fripp, so you can listen to this album, and if you've listened to Discipline, if you've listened to Beat, Three of a Perfect Pair, you've got a pretty good idea of where he's going to go. Mm-hmm. Okay, because this was put out that same time. So it's an 80s album.
It's definitely, from someone that I know you probably have a lot more of a background knowledge of production and stuff, and we'll get into production a little bit more as we talk, but you can tell, even with it being instrumental and you not hearing how the vocals are produced and stuff, you can tell that it's 80s. Oh yes,
it has the 80s tone, the 80s guitar sound, which for a lot of musicians and people that really listen to the 80s, you'll notice that clean stereo chorus with a hint of compression on it.
Yeah.
And then you'll have your distorted sound, usually in sometimes the case of Marshalls. However, you also would have had at the time the big muff pedal was heavily used during this time. Mm. And so, I mean, it has that 80s chorus sound. Just put it on the middle pickup, keep it clean, put it through a Roland amp.
And what's it like recreating those sounds on a more, modern, setup? I know for you, a lot of your stuff is definitely not from the 80s, but you're still playing it and it sounds the same. So, what's it like doing that?
When Thrax started, I had a multi-unit that I ran through a JC120, so it was really easy. I just used the modeled MXR compressor that was in there and ran it through the amp, and suddenly you have the 80s sound there. I've kind of moved on to other things at this point, so using a Line 6 Helix, but it's the same thing. All the amps are in there, and they're modeled quite well. And I just set the signal chain up like they would have had it in the 80s and pretty much get it. There might be a few things that have to be adjusted just because it's digital, but otherwise it's not a very difficult tone to achieve if you know what the equipment was being used.
Yeah. And since we're talking about production, I'll just say what I wrote down here. I said you can tell that they take every part of it very seriously. They make sure every single note is precise and perfect, and it's very much not a single hair out of place style of producing.
Correct on that. Robert Fripp has stated that he does play by feel. So, if it feels right, he'll play it. But there is an element of a place for everything and everything in its place. So if something's not working, it's go back to the drawing board and figure out what will.
Yeah, and they're probably, maybe I'm wrong, I just don't know enough, but, it doesn't sound like they're the, click track instrumentalists kind of thing. Do they play when they record?
I couldn't say if they played to any click track. I don't think so at this time. I could be wrong.
Or some metronome or some sort of, something right. to keep them on.
I could be wrong. I don't think that they were playing to a click track, and I haven't read anything regarding that. I do believe that it most likely is just free playing. I do know that Fripp and company have gone to click track as of 2014 when they got back together. But again, that's a state of mind. Does the click track play you, or do you play the click track? And that's really kind of a paraphrase of something I heard Fripp say in an interview quite a while back. And I guess it's just a mindset of playing to a click track. Is it going to be, click tracks can be boring.
Yeah.
And because the beat remains steady the whole way through. the tempo doesn't waver like it would if it was a free band playing.
Yeah.
Without one. So, but I couldn't say to this album.
I'm gonna go into standout tracks. For me, I said that it felt like quite a short album, even though it was like 15 songs, and some of those songs are like 5 minutes. Oh, I forgot there's like, I can hear the tornado sirens going outside. Yeah, it definitely did not feel as long as I expected it to when you sent it to me. Like I said, you have like a physical copy. What I have is the one that's on Apple Music, so mine might look a little different than yours.
Right. The Apple Music one is pretty much the release. If you were listening to the one that had 2025 and the brackets next to it, it had 2 extras songs added onto it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it was actually just a 10-track album.
Oh, okay.
So in the case of recording it, the constraints of vinyl were being considered.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because on mine it was 15 songs, and I remember looking at that and thinking, like, that does not make sense. But I put down for my top 3, and I'm sure this is going to be a difficult question for you, considering you've listened to it a lot longer, and you're more, I'm trying to think of the right word, but more skilled with it. I picked In the Cloud Forest, 7 on 7, and Girl on a Swing.
Okay.
I don't know what you would consider to be your top 3 for this.
My top 3? The interesting thing about it, about the Advanced Mask for me, is I'm looking here at the release of it that I have, and in terms of my favorites, I mean, Advanced Mask, was the first song on it, and it really kind of took me in. It reminded me of Discipline.
Yeah.
And then, Andy Summers comes flying in with all of his stuff that you're really used to from the Police. And I love the Police. I even have their box set of their entire release. All their 5 of their albums, I guess. And
they're the only 3 pop figures you have too.
Yeah, as a gift from you.
Yes.
Yeah. I do have those Funko Pop figures that sit there by the studio, the 3 of them looking over me. So that first track I really love. The China Yellow Leader was the other one that I really enjoy, as well as the whole Girl on a Swing.
Yeah.
So but I like the whole album, and I do need to go back and correct it, because it's actually, there are 13 tracks on this album, and there were 4 extra early mixes and remixes added to to this release.
I do kind of want to ask about, because for my album that we'll be talking about next month, I talk a lot about the lyrical themes and musical themes, because I know a lot about that artist and what they're talking about in that album, and I'm sure you know the same, so I was going to ask you to kind of dive in a little bit more on the themes behind this
the themes
project.
Behind it? From what I have read, Robert Fripp and Andy Summers have basically kind of been passing by each other for years, starting in the 60s and throughout the 70s, and they knew of each other, and in fact, like, one replaced the other in some hotel band back in '65, and Andy Summers was doing his Zoot Money and Police, and then Robert Fripp is off doing King Crimson from '69 on out, including his stint in New York, where he lived there for a while, played with all of the great bands like Talking Heads and Blondie, and was really kind of like, he calls it the Drive to '81, which was all about getting that sound and getting that mindset of what he felt was coming, based on all of the stuff he was introducing to himself during living in New York. Because playing at CBGBs and hanging out with all those great bands, even doing his solo album Exposure with Daryl Hall.
It's an interesting pairing there.
As the singer on that. But then, Fripp was playing on Bowie and Peter Gabriel as well. He's played on some of it and producing those albums. But, the drive to 81 was basically going right into Discipline. 81 was when Discipline came out. That was what he was working, to achieve the aim. One must suffer, he says, so that that suffering must have been those 6 years during somewhat of getting there.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk more about it when we talk about Discipline, because I know that's the next album you picked. But you said this is like him focusing on living in New York and stuff like that, which was also a focus for Discipline too. So were a lot of this of these songs worked on within the same time frame, pretty much, or
you're looking at the time period of 81 to 84.
Okay.
In the case of this, and when Fripp and Summers got together, they had their ideas for songs that they could put on it, and just kind of played for each other what they had, and then tried to bring it together, maybe even write a few together. So when you're listening to this album, you'll notice that there's some of the phrases that Fripp plays ended up showing up on King Crimson's Beat album. I think there was one that had the phrase from Neurotica in it. So, because that there's that belief of seeing music as fluid. And if you are the artist who wrote that piece, and you can translate that piece into another piece, then, you're getting more out of it and perhaps invoking a different feeling from it.
Yeah, and I talked about that when I was writing about comparing it to some of the other work. Now, I'm not as familiar with Andy Summers outside of the Police, but obviously because of Threck, I'm very familiar with Fripp. So I even wrote on here, I said, I'm sure you'll say it's nothing like their other stuff, but I could definitely hear some sections that I would say are recycled from other songs of Fripp's, which you talked about, like how he views the fluidity of music. But I also said that I don't think it necessarily takes away from this being an individual body of work versus a group effort of King Crimson.
Right. No, it doesn't take away or detract from what Discipline is. Because Discipline's a great album in itself. I mean, I can only imagine what the writing sessions must have been for Discipline when they were at when they started them at that Cold Church Hall there out in, I can't remember where in England, but they talked about it being cold. But nonetheless, it was like I can only imagine being a fly on the wall for those writing sessions and bringing in, because I know I've read some of the stuff I've read on it was the writing of Thela Hungingid even off of that one, which brings in, you'll hear some of the elements of that Fripp style coming out in this Summers Fripp here.
I wish I could remember. I didn't write it down, but I remember there being a specific song while listening to this where I was like, I said like, oh, that's literally like copy pasted piece. But I mean, that I think when you do more instrumental stuff, I feel like that just kind of comes with the territory, especially when you have your own sound figured out.
As well as using the different time signatures.
Yeah.
There might be, it might feel 4/4, but there's something going on in 7/8 underneath it, or just any odd time signature that Fripp likes that ends up throwing in there, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah. Personal opinion. This is kind of my favorite section. I love just talking about what we genuinely think about this. I said, I think I said this before, but I'll say it again. This is definitely not something I would have gravitated towards on my own, which is very fun for me because, and I think that's what's fun about doing this project with you, is while we do have a lot of overlapping music tastes, because my music taste started from yours, we also have very different music tastes too, and that also comes into play with like the next episode where we're doing one of my albums that I know for a fact you never would have listened to if it wasn't for me. So like, just because I wouldn't have necessarily like, you know, picked it up off of a shelf at Target or something, like I know they probably, I don't know if they have this there right now or not, but like, just because I wouldn't have done that, like gone into a store and picked it up off the shelf, doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't worth listening to for me.
I'm not sure you would have found this at Target. In fact, I'm pretty sure. I mean, you probably would have found it at one of the specialty CD shops, possibly.
Oh, like probably like a vintage vinyl or something.
Vintage vinyl or CD, you know, I think maybe CD Warehouse. One of those.
Oh, I have no idea.
One of the really the small the mom and pop CD places, because they would typically order, you know, maybe one copy to have on the shelf to have up there. You know, I ordered this one directly from the King Crimson shop on Burning Shed. So, you know, I basically go to the source whenever I buy any of their stuff now.
And that's through DGM, right? Or
DGM used to have their own shop and sell the product. Starting at the beginning of 2025, they moved most, if not all of their sales well, definitely sales of CDs and media and that over to Burning Shed out of the United Kingdom.
Okay.
Now, so the DGM shop is somewhat, I guess, closed, because I only ever click on the Burning Shed one on there and don't really even see another one on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I did say, like, I'm a lyrical person, too, which I know you can be, but you've also found an interest in more instrumental stuff in your life, and I haven't. I haven't gotten to that. So that's one of the things that, for me, became a hesitancy on whether or not it would be something I would listen to again, outside of being around you, of course. Right. Because I'm sure you'll play it around me now.
It'll get played a lot. I mean, I still put it on in the car. I'm sitting in the living room. It's still just a great album, and it kind of went unnoticed by me when I was in the 80s, when I was learning to play guitar and that. I mean, the only album from King Crimson that I was aware of, and it was 6 years after the album was released, was Discipline.
Yeah, and that was Bill.
Yeah.
Give a shout out to Bill,
you
there.
know, and then I did not engage in any more King Crimson until around 96 or 97.
Yeah.
So, and then I went crazy.
And started a band.
And started picking up everything I could get my hands on that included those musicians.
And now I'm looking over, and I want to mention, once again, if you don't know our family too well, I'm an only child, and I look over to my dad's computer. We're in his music room right now, which used to be my bedroom, and I look over at his computer, and my mother and I are nowhere to be seen on there. It is all King Crimson album covers with a photo of our cat in the middle. So if that proves where his loyalties lie, folks.
I don't think you need to be like that.
But I gave it, I know you're probably going to be like, I can't rate this, it's too difficult. But I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Really?
I did. Yes.
That's a fantastic score.
I have a feeling you probably expected me to be like 3 or something, like super low. So I wanted to surprise you a little bit there.
And you're right. I am not going to rate it. In fact, I will rate very few of these albums that my daughter and I will be talking about on this. So, you know, I'm just kind of here to give my input as the older person, I suppose. Why she was letting me do the first choice, I'll never know. But here we are.
It's because the first episode goes out on your birthday. We can't do one of my albums on your birthday. That doesn't sound right to me. But other than that, what else have been part of your current listens? That's the end of our podcast here, as we start talking about some other stuff that we've been playing and listening to and hearing.
Well, a lot of the summer concert series that we've been on for the 2025 here, so... And it's all over the place.
It is.
It goes from Ozark Mountain Daredevils to 38 Special to Kansas. Mm-hmm. You know, to Bachman Turner Overdrive.
That was a great show. Yes.
I still need to add some Weird Al in there. So it just a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Plus a lot of Beatles. A lot of Beatles.
Yeah. And I've been a crazy human being this year with all the concerts I've been going to. Still adding more concerts to my list, even though we're in September now. I'm going to see Renee Rapp in October in Minneapolis, so I've been listening to her album on, like, repeat, like, constantly. The other album I've been listening to a whole bunch has been Wishbone by Conan Gray, which is next month's episode. Man's Best Friend by Sabrina Carpenter just came out on Friday. I'm easing into it. It's taking me a little bit longer to really get into it than I expected. But I went to a listening party at Vintage Vinyl, and I did the same thing for Conan Gray's Wishbone. And I did not like the album when I first heard it at the listening party. But then when I heard it by myself, I loved it. And so I think I'm just not one of those people that can do a first listen in, like, a public setting. I think it ruins it for me. I think I'm not able to enjoy it as much. And Weird Al, because obviously the day that this comes out, we'll be seeing him.
There'll be some good shows.
Yep, we've got that. And
I know back on the Summers Fripp, I would recommend getting and/or listening to the album in some way if you really like just two guys just experimenting like crazy.
It's on streaming, so
yeah.
If you have, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, any of those, heck, I'm sure it's probably on, like, SoundCloud even if you.
And then if you're
really
obsessive
popular.
like me, you go and you get the surround sound box set.
Yep, and you see a weirdo with glasses and a very blonde man hanging out together. But yeah, that's today's episode. That's our first episode. This is a monthly thing, so it's not as common as some of my other series are. If you're into travel stuff, I've got the travel series. He's on one of those. We went and saw Ozark Mountain Daredevils back in June, and so he was in one of those videos with me. Went to Texas, and there's going to be a bunch of other travel stuff going on that I'm going to do for that. There's a book podcast called The Pretty Little Book Nerds, where we talk about everything from dirty little smut to horror, and that's fun. I also have Docu-Minded, which is my solo show that's going to be starting in October, where I watch documentaries and you hear me get mad at people about how they handle certain situations. But other than that, come back October 9th, and we'll be talking about Conan Gray's Wishbone, which we're going to record here in a minute. Anything to add, Dad?
Nope, just thanks for tuning in. And go listen to the Andy Summers and Robert Fripp, I Advance Masked, or just the complete recordings.
Yep.